"You're my mother's friend, Silvio." "We shouldn't do this," she whispered, her breath hitching as his shadow swallowed her. Silvio didn't flinch, his hand steady as he tilted her face toward the moon. "Are you sure, Elena? Because I have 50 years of experience, and I can tell you exactly how this ends." The story opens at the Moretti estate, a sprawling monument of iron and stone overlooking the dark waters of Lake Como, during the funeral wake of the family matriarch. Elena Moretti arrives, feeling the suffocating weight of the Moretti legacy and her mother's suffocating plans for her future. Silvio Valenti is introduced as a lethal, predator-like figure watching her from the shadows of the upper balcony, establishing an immediate sense of danger and an undeniable, forbidden intrigue. Welcome, Helen romance library lovers. If stories of forbidden love and dangerous men make your heart race, please support me by subscribing. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can bring you more addictive tales that will leave you breathless. Your support means the world to me. Now, let's dive into Sienna Brooks and Lorenzo Moretti's story. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking Lake Como, ancient cypress trees standing sentinel over generations of Moretti dead. Elena had forgotten how beautiful it was here, how the morning mist clung to the water like a lover reluctant to leave, how the mountains rose in the distance like silent judges watching over the sins of the valley below. She had not forgotten the weight of it, though. That crushing, invisible pressure that had chased her across Europe and an ocean, that had whispered in her ear during every lecture at university, every glass of wine in a London pub, every moment she had tried to pretend she was just a normal girl with a normal life. Asterisk, "You are Moretti," the waiter said. "You cannot run from blood." The funeral had been 3 days ago, but the family had gathered again for the reading of the will. Elena stood apart from the others, her black dress too simple for this crowd, her face bare of the heavy makeup the other women wore like armor. She watched her mother hold court near the family mausoleum, accepting condolences with the grace of a woman who had been rehearsing for this moment her entire life. Caterina Moretti had waited a long time to become the matriarch. Now that Nana Lucia was finally in the ground, Elena could almost see the satisfaction glittering beneath her mother's practiced grief. It made her sick. She turned away, walking deeper into the cemetery, past the ornate headstones and marble angels, until she found a quiet bench beneath a twisted olive tree. From here, she could see the lake and could almost pretend she was somewhere else entirely. Almost. "You've developed a habit of running." The voice came from behind her, low, measured, and familiar in a way that made her spine stiffen. She didn't turn around. "I'm not running. I'm avoiding." There's a difference. Running implies fear. She finally looked over her shoulder. "I'm not afraid of anyone here." Silvio Valenti stepped out of the shadow of a stone angel, and Elena felt something cold slide through her chest. He looked the same as she remembered, and completely different. The silver at his temples had spread since she'd last seen him, 5 years ago, when she'd been 19 and desperate to escape. His face was still carved from granite, all sharp angles and controlled stillness. But there was something in his eyes now, something she couldn't quite name as he looked at her. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her flat in London. His hands were clasped behind his back in that military posture he'd never quite shed. He looked like what he was, a man who had killed for her family, who had built an empire of shadows alongside her mother, and who had watched Elena grow up with the same detached assessment he might give a promising investment. But his eyes, as they met hers across the space between the graves, were not detached. Not at all. "You've changed," he said. "I grew up." Yes. The word was heavy with something unspoken. "You did." Elena rose from the bench, smoothing her dress with hands that wanted to tremble but refused to give him the satisfaction. She had learned long ago that showing weakness to men like Silvio was a mistake you only made once. "I'm surprised my mother let you off the leash long enough to come find me." Something flickered in his expression, there and gone before she could identify it. Your mother doesn't control me, Elena. No. She smiled, and it felt sharp on her face, a weapon she'd perfected during her years away. Then who does? He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, and Elena became suddenly, viscerally aware of how tall he was and how he seemed to take up all the oxygen in the air between them. The scent of him reached her. Sandalwood and smoke and something darker underneath, something that made her think of locked rooms and whispered confessions. You came back, he said, and it wasn't a question. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not for people like us. The words tasted bitter. Isn't that what you always used to tell me? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You remember that. I remember everything, Silvio. She held his gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to be the first to break. Every lesson. Every warning. Every time you looked at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be seen. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. In the distance, Elena could hear the murmur of voices, her family gathering like vultures over the remains of Nonna Lucia's legacy. But here, in this quiet corner of the cemetery, there was only Silvio and the ghosts. I never saw you as a problem, he said finally, and his voice was rough in a way she'd never heard before. That was never the issue. Before she could ask what he meant, her mother's voice rang out across the gravestones like a bell. Elena, we're beginning. Silvio stepped back, and the moment shattered like glass. His face smoothed into its familiar mask of polished professionalism, and he gestured toward the path with one elegant hand. After you, Miss Moretti. Elena stared at him for a long moment, trying to read the secrets behind his eyes. But he was stone again, impenetrable, the man who had frightened her as a child and infuriated her as a teenager and who now, somehow, made her feel something far more dangerous than either. She walked past him without another word, close enough to feel the heat of his body, close enough to see the slight flare of his nostrils as she passed. She didn't look back, but she felt his eyes on her all the way to the mausoleum, felt them burning through the thin fabric of her dress, felt them like hands she remembered from 100 childhood nightmares, hands that could protect or destroy with equal efficiency. When she took her place beside her mother, Caterina leaned close and whispered, I see Silvio found you. Was he supposed to? Her mother's smile was a knife wrapped in silk. Silvio always does exactly what he's supposed to, darling. That's why I trust him. Elena looked across the gathering, found Silvio standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her blood run cold and hot at the same time, in ways she refused to examine. What are you, she thought, that looking at me like that feels more dangerous than all the guns in this cemetery? He didn't answer. He couldn't have. But something in his gaze shifted, almost imperceptibly, and Elena understood with sudden, terrifying clarity. Whatever was happening here, it had only just begun. The study had been Nonna Lucia's sanctuary, a room of dark wood and leather-bound books and secrets whispered into the fire. Now, Caterina sat behind the mahogany desk as if she'd been born there, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, her eyes tracking Elena with the focused attention of a predator watching wounded prey. Sit down, Elena. I prefer to stand. I wasn't asking. The words hung in the air between them, and Elena felt, suddenly, the full weight of what had changed. Her grandmother had been a shield, however imperfect, a buffer between Elena and her mother's machinations. Now that the shield was gone, there was nothing between Elena and the full force of Caterina's ambition. She sat. Good. Caterina smiled, and it didn't reach her eyes. Now, we need to discuss your future. I have a future. In London. My job, my flat. Your little publishing position. Your tiny apartment in some dreadful neighborhood. Katerina waved a hand as if dispersing smoke. That life is over, Elena. It was always a fantasy, and fantasies must end. Elena's hands curled into fists in her lap. You can't make me stay. I can, actually. I control the family accounts. Your grandmother's bequest is tied to conditions of residency. If you return to London, you inherit nothing. Worse than nothing, you'll be cut off entirely. No money, no connections, no protection. Katerina leaned forward. And we both know there are people who would be very interested to learn that Elena Moretti is wandering around Europe without the family shield. Cold fear slid down Elena's spine. She'd always known, in an abstract way, about the enemies the family had made over generations. But hearing her mother speak of it so casually, so weaponized, made it real in a way it had never been before. You're threatening me. I'm educating you. There's a difference. Katerina rose from the desk and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds where gardeners trimmed hedges into geometric perfection. I've planned your entire life for this moment, Elena. You were always meant to come home. Meant to come home to what? To take your rightful place. Katerina turned. The Moretti family needs an heir. A visible, legitimate face for our more respectable operations. That will be you. And the less respectable operations will continue as they always have, under appropriate management. Something flickered in Katerina's eyes. Which brings me to your immediate future. A knock at the door. Before Elena could react, it opened, and Silvio stepped inside. He had changed from the cemetery, now wearing a dark gray suit, his silver-streaked hair immaculate, his expression as unreadable as marble. He nodded once to Katerina, then let his gaze rest on Elena for a moment that stretched too long. You asked for me. I did. Katerina gestured him forward. Elena needs to be brought up to speed on certain family matters, and she needs protection while she adjusts to her new circumstances. Elena's blood went cold. Protection. There have been rumblings. The Calabrese family, the Russians, they see Mama's death as an opportunity. Until the power structure is stabilized, you're a target. Katerina's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing dinner arrangements. Silvio has agreed to serve as your personal security. My personal? Elena stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. Absolutely not. I don't recall asking for your opinion. He's your attack dog, Mother. Not my babysitter. The words hung in the air, sharp and reckless. Elena saw something flash in Silvio's eyes. Anger? Amusement? Something else entirely? Before his expression smoothed back into neutrality, Katerina's smile was patient and terrifying. Silvio is the most capable man in our organization. He has protected this family for 30 years. He will protect you now, whether you like it or not. I can take care of myself. You've been working in a publishing house and drinking cheap wine with university friends. Katerina's voice dropped, cold and precise. You cannot begin to take care of yourself. Not in this world. Not yet. Elena turned to Silvio, desperate now, searching his face for some crack in the facade. And you agreed to this? To be my jailer. I agreed to keep you alive. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Whatever you choose to call it is your business. This is insane. I'm not a child. I don't need someone following me around. The decision is made. Katerina returned to her desk, dismissing the argument as if it had never happened. Silvio will be moving into the East Wing, close to your quarters. He will accompany you when you leave the estate, attend any functions, and vet any visitors. Consider him your shadow, Elena. Your very loyal, very watchful shadow. Elena's throat was tight with fury and something that felt dangerously close to tears. She would not cry. Not in front of her mother. Not in front of him. And if I refuse, then you'll find yourself without access to the estate, the accounts, or the family name. Katerina's eyes were chips of ice. You'll be alone, Elena. Completely, utterly alone. And I promise you, the people who want to hurt this family will not care that you're estranged. They'll only care that you're vulnerable. The silence was absolute. Elena looked between her mother and Silvio, searching for some escape, some leverage, some way out of the trap that was closing around her. There was none. Fine. The word tasted like ash. But don't expect me to make it easy for him. Katerina's smile was triumphant. I wouldn't dream of it, darling. Silvio does love a challenge. Elena didn't look at him as she walked toward the door. She couldn't. If she looked at him now, she would see the satisfaction in his eyes, the quiet victory of a man who always got what he was assigned to get. But as she passed him, his hand caught her elbow. Just for a moment, just long enough to stop her. Elena. She made herself meet his eyes. I'm not your enemy, he said quietly, too low for her mother to hear. Whatever you think of me, whatever you remember, I'm not here to hurt you. Then why are you here? He held her gaze, and for a moment something cracked in the stone of his expression. Something vulnerable, something almost human. Because your mother asked, he said. And because I couldn't say no. Not when it was you. He released her arm before she could respond, stepping back, his face a mask again. Elena walked out of the study with her heart pounding and his words echoing in her ears. Not when it was you. What the hell did that mean? And why did some traitorous part of her desperately want to find out? Sleep wouldn't come. Elena lay in her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling where she'd once stuck glow-in-the-dark stars that had long since been removed. The room had been redecorated in her absence, all traces of the rebellious teenager scrubbed away, replaced by tasteful cream walls and expensive linens that felt like a stranger's skin. Midnight came and went. Then 1 o'clock. Then 2. Finally, she threw off the covers and pulled on a silk robe over her thin nightgown. If she couldn't sleep, she would find something to read. The library had always been her refuge as a child, the one place in this mausoleum where she could escape into other worlds, other lives, and other possibilities. The hallway was dark, lit only by the occasional security light that cast pools of amber across the marble floors. Elena walked barefoot, silent, past closed doors and sleeping ghosts, until she reached the east wing and the library's heavy oak doors. She slipped inside. The room was vast. 2 stories of leather-bound books and rolling ladders and deep leather chairs that smelled of old tobacco. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Elena moved to the fiction section by instinct, her fingers trailing along spines she remembered from childhood. Adventure novels, romantic epics, and stories of women who escaped their destinies and made new ones. Fantasies, as her mother would say. But fantasies had kept her sane. She pulled a book at random, some gothic romance she'd devoured at 15, and settled into one of the leather chairs, tucking her legs beneath her, letting the familiar weight of the story pull her away from her own. You should be asleep. Elena's heart stopped, then raced. She looked up to find Silvio standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the dim hallway light. He was dressed down, no jacket, no tie, just a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows and his collar open at the throat. He looked almost human. Almost. So should you, she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Does your job require you to lurk in doorways at 2 in the morning? My job requires me to know where you are at all times. He stepped into the room, and the door swung closed behind him with a soft click. You weren't in your room. So you panicked. I don't panic. He moved closer, and Elena became aware of how little she was wearing. The thin silk robe, the nightgown that suddenly felt transparent. I investigated. And now you found me. Crisis averted. You can go. He didn't go. Instead, he walked to the window and looked out at the moonlit grounds, his profile sharp against the silver light. There was a tension in his shoulders that Elena had never seen before, a weariness, almost, that cracked the perfect facade of control. I used to find you here when you were young, he said quietly. Curled up in that same chair, lost in some book about knights and princesses. I remember. Elena closed her own book, watching him. You never said anything. Just checked that I was there and left. It wasn't my place to say anything. And now? He turned from the window, and the moonlight caught his eyes, turning them to molten silver. Now I'm not sure what my place is. The admission hung in the air between them, shocking in its honesty. Elena set the book aside and rose from the chair, painfully conscious of how the silk clung to her body and how his gaze followed the movement with an intensity that made her skin flush. Why did you really agree to this, Sylvia? She took a step toward him, then another. And don't tell me it's because my mother asked. You could have refused. You've refused her before. Have I? When I was 18, she wanted you to stop me from applying to universities abroad. You didn't. Something flickered in his expression. You knew about that? Nana told me. Elena stopped a few feet away from him, close enough to see the tension in his jaw and the slight parting of his lips. She said you told my mother that I deserved a chance to be something other than a Moretti. That caging me would break me. Your grandmother talked too much. She loved me. She wanted me to know that someone in this family was on my side. Elena tilted her head, studying him. Were you on my side? The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Silvio's hands were clenched at his sides, and Elena watched the war playing out behind his eyes. Discipline against something darker, something that made the air between them feel like it was crackling with electricity. You need to go back to your room, Elena. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you. She should have listened. She should have retreated to her room and locked the door and pretended this moment had never happened. But something wild had taken hold of her. The same reckless impulse that had driven her to apply to foreign universities, to flee to London, and to walk into this library at 2 in the morning wearing almost nothing. She took another step forward. I'm not a child anymore, Sylvia. His breath caught. She saw it, the slight hitch in his chest, the way his eyes dropped to her lips before snapping back up. I'm aware. Then stop treating me like one. She was close enough now to touch him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Stop looking at me like I'm a problem to be solved or an asset to be protected. Just see me. Elena. Her name was a warning, rough and low. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking for the truth. She reached up almost without thinking and touched his jaw. The muscle jumped beneath her fingers. Why did you agree to be my shadow? Why do you look at me like that when you think I can't see? Why did you tell my mother that caging me would break me? His hand came up to cover hers, and for a moment she thought he would push her away. Instead, he held her there, his palm warm against her fingers, his thumb stroking her wrist where her pulse raced. Because I've spent 30 years watching you grow up, he said, and his voice was barely a whisper. Because every time I thought about you, alone in London, something in my chest felt wrong. Because when I saw you step out of that car at the funeral, I knew that everything I had convinced myself of for years was a lie. What did you convince yourself of? His eyes held hers, dark and deep and full of something that looked almost like pain. That you were just a girl. Just another responsibility. That was what I felt was protection, duty, the instinct of a man who had known you since you were a child. His grip on her wrist tightened almost imperceptibly. You are not a child, Elena. I know that now. God help me, I know. The words hung between them like a confession, like a sin, like the beginning of something that could not be taken back. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She should pull away. She should run. She should remember who he was. Her mother's weapon, the family's enforcer, a man with blood on his hands and 30 years of ruthless service behind him. Instead, she whispered, "What happens now?" Silvio closed his eyes for a moment, as if steeling himself against something. When he opened them again, the vulnerability was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of control. Now you go back to your room. He released her hand and stepped back, putting distance between them. And I pretend this conversation never happened. And if I don't want to pretend, then we have a problem. His voice was hard now, but Elena heard the crack beneath it. Because what I feel for you could destroy everything. Your mother, the alliance, the family. And I won't let that happen. Even if. Especially if. He moved toward the door, and Elena felt the moment slipping away like water through her fingers. Good night, Elena. Lock your door. He was gone before she could respond, the library door closing softly behind him, leaving her alone with the moonlight and the ghosts and a heart that couldn't decide whether to break or ignite. She stood there for a long time, her hand still tingling where he had touched her. I won't let that happen, he had said. But as Elena finally made her way back to her room, she found herself wondering, what if it was already too late? The Fondazione Marchetti Charity Gala was the event of the season, a glittering display of wealth, power, and carefully calibrated violence dressed in evening wear. The Morettas had donated an obscene sum to the Children's Hospital Fund, which meant Elena was expected to attend, to smile, and to play the part of the prodigal daughter returned to the fold. She intended to play a very different game. The dress her mother had chosen was conservative. Midnight blue, high-necked, and elegant in an unthreatening way. Elena had discarded it in favor of something she'd had couriered from Milan. Blood-red silk that clung to every curve, with a plunging back that left her spine exposed to the candlelight. When she descended the staircase, her mother's expression could have frozen the lake. "What are you wearing?" "A dress." Elena smiled sweetly. "Isn't that what one wears to galas?" "You look like a—" "Careful, mother." The smile didn't waver. "Silvio's right behind you." Caterina turned, and indeed, Silvio had emerged from the study, adjusting his cufflinks with the casual precision of a man preparing for battle. He wore a tuxedo that had clearly been tailored to within an inch of its life, every line emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the lean power of his frame. His eyes swept over Elena, and she watched with satisfaction as something cracked in his careful composure. His jaw tightened. His hands stilled on his cuffs. For a moment, just a moment, the mask slipped and she saw raw, undisguised want flash across his features. Then it was gone and he was stone again. "We should leave," he said, his voice perfectly neutral. "The car is waiting." The gala was held at a palazzo on the edge of the city, its ancient walls draped in fairy lights, its gardens filled with the cream of Italian society, and the underbelly that financed it. Elena moved through the crowd on her mother's arm, smiling and nodding, playing the perfect daughter while scanning the room for opportunities. She found one by the champagne table. Marco Calabrese was young for a family boss, early 30s, with the kind of dark good looks that graced magazine covers. He was also the Morettas' chief rival, a man whose family had been encroaching on their territory for years. Caterina had spoken of him with barely concealed contempt, which made him perfect. Elena extracted herself from her mother's orbit with a murmured excuse about the powder room and made her way toward him. "You're Marco Calabrese, aren't you?" He turned, and his eyes widened slightly as he took in her dress, her face, and the deliberate challenge in her smile. "And you're Elena Moretti, the prodigal daughter." His smile was smooth and practiced. "I was hoping we'd get a chance to meet." "Were you? Your reputation precedes you." He handed her a glass of champagne, letting his fingers brush hers. "The runaway princess who escaped to London. Very romantic. I prefer strategic retreat." Elena sipped the champagne, holding his gaze. "But I'm back now." "So I see." His eyes traveled down her body with appreciation that he didn't bother to hide. "And causing quite the stir from what I hear." "I do try." They talked. Elena laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, and leaned in close enough to smell his cologne. She could feel eyes on her, her mother's disapproval boring into her back, the whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire, and Silvio's gaze, burning hotter than all the rest. She found him when she glanced across the ballroom, standing against the far wall, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his body, the way his free hand was clenched into a fist at his side. "Good. Would you like to dance?" Marco offered his hand. "I promise I'm an excellent lead." "I'd love to." The dance floor was crowded, but Marco was indeed skilled, guiding her through the waltz with confident ease. Elena let herself be led, hyper-aware of the hand on her bare back, the intimacy of the dance. "Your mother must be furious," Marco murmured in her ear. "My mother can go to hell." He laughed, delighted. "I think I like you, Elena Moretti. You're nothing like the rest of your family." "Is that a compliment?" "In my experience, it's the highest one I can give." His hand slid a fraction lower on her back. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." "Perhaps we—" "May I cut in?" Silvio's voice was ice and silk, cutting through the moment like a blade. He stood beside them, and Elena had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. They were burning. Marco's jaw tightened. "We're in the middle of a dance." "The dance is over." Silvio's tone left no room for argument. "Elena, your mother requires you." "My mother can wait." "She can't." His hand closed around her wrist, firm but not painful. "Now, Elena." The entire room was watching. Elena could feel it. The held breaths, the avid eyes, the knowledge that something was happening here that went beyond mere interruption. She could fight him, make a scene, embarrass him in front of everyone. But something in his eyes stopped her. Something that wasn't anger or control, but something rawer. Something desperate. "Fine." She turned to Marco with an apologetic smile. "Another time. I'll look forward to it." Marco's eyes flicked to Silvio with barely concealed hostility. "Valenti. Calabrese." The two men stared at each other for a moment, and Elena felt the violence humming in the air between them. Years of rivalry, blood feuds, and deaths that had never been avenged. Then Silvio was leading her off the dance floor, his grip on her wrist unrelenting, his stride so fast she had to nearly run to keep up. He didn't take her to her mother. Instead, he pulled her through a side door, down a marble hallway, and into a small antechamber that smelled of dust and old flowers. The door closed behind them, and suddenly they were alone, and Silvio's composure was finally spectacularly shattered. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Dancing." Elena yanked her wrist free. "It's what people do at galas." "With Marco Calabrese? Do you have any idea who he is? What has his family done to ours?" "I know exactly who he is. That's rather the point." Silvio's hands came up, gripping her shoulders, his face inches from hers. This isn't a game, Elena. Calabrese is dangerous. He would use you to destroy your mother, your family, everything. Good. The word tore out of her. Maybe I want to destroy it. Maybe I want to burn this whole rotten empire to the ground. You don't mean that. Don't tell me what I mean. She shoved at his chest, but he didn't move. You don't know me, Silvio. You think you do, but you don't. You only know the girl I was, the puppet my mother wanted me to be. But I'm not her anymore. No. His voice had dropped, his grip on her shoulders gentling but not releasing. You're not. The anger between them shifted, transformed, and became something else entirely. Elena was breathing hard, her chest heaving against his, and she became suddenly aware of how close they were, how she could feel his heart pounding beneath his tuxedo, how his eyes had darkened to black. You wanted my attention, he said quietly. You have it. I don't want your attention. I want. What? He stepped closer, and her back met the wall. What do you want, Elena? She should lie. She should push him away. She should remember all the reasons this was impossible. Instead, she told the truth. I want you to stop pretending you don't feel this. Silvio's eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, the beast was there. The thing he kept caged beneath the suits and the control and the years of loyal service. It was hungry. It was terrifying. It was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world. You're playing with fire, he said. Maybe I want to burn. His forehead dropped to hers, and for a moment they just breathed together, sharing air, sharing heat, sharing the edge of a precipice they both knew they were about to fall over. This can't happen, he whispered. Then walk away. He didn't move. Walk away, Silvio. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, his touch so gentle it made her ache. I can't. The words were broken, raw. God help me, I can't. The door at the end of the hallway opened. Voices. Footsteps. Reality is crashing back in. Silvio stepped back like he'd been burned, his mask slamming back into place so fast Elena almost thought she'd imagined the whole thing. We should return, he said, and his voice was steady again, controlled. Your mother will be looking for you. Elena straightened her dress with trembling hands. This isn't over. No. He met her eyes, and beneath the mask the beast still burned. It isn't. They walked back to the gala side by side, not touching, not speaking. But everything had changed. 3 days of silence. 3 days of Silvio acting as though the moment in the antechamber had never happened, as though he hadn't confessed that he couldn't walk away, as though she hadn't seen the beast beneath the mask. Elena was going insane. She paced her room like a caged animal, attended endless meetings with lawyers and accountants, and smiled through dinners with her mother while Silvio stood against the wall like a statue, never meeting her eyes. This can't happen, he had said. And apparently he meant it. Fine. If he wanted to pretend, let him pretend. She would find her own way out of this prison. The underground casino operated in an abandoned textile factory on the outskirts of Milan. Elena had heard whispers of it during the gala, a place where the rules of respectable society didn't apply, where fortunes were won and lost, and occasionally people disappeared. It was exactly the kind of place Katerina would forbid her from going, which made it exactly the kind of place Elena needed to be. She waited until after midnight, until the house was silent and even Silvio's light had gone out. Then she slipped out through the service entrance, dressed in black jeans and a leather jacket, her hair loose around her shoulders. The car she'd arranged was waiting at the end of the drive, a nondescript sedan with a driver who asked no questions. Elena slid into the back seat and felt, for the first time in weeks, like she could breathe. The factory was chaos. Flashing lights, pounding music, and bodies pressed together around roulette wheels and card tables. The air smelled of cigarette smoke, expensive perfume, and desperation. Elena moved through the crowd like she belonged, because that was the key to surviving in places like this. Never look like prey. She found a blackjack table and sat down, exchanging cash for chips, letting the rhythm of the cards pull her out of her own head. She won, then lost, then won again. The hours slipped by in a haze of smoke and adrenaline. She was just beginning to relax when she felt it. That prickling awareness at the back of her neck that meant she was being watched. Elena turned. Silvio stood at the edge of the crowd, and his face was thunder. She had a moment to think, "Oh, fuck," before he was moving toward her, cutting through the crowd like a shark through water, people parting before him as if by instinct. He wasn't running. He didn't need to. Every step radiated danger. Elena. Her name was a command. "We're leaving. I'm in the middle of a game. The game is over." He reached past her and swept her chips off the table, sending them scattering. The dealer opened his mouth to protest, then saw Silvio's face and wisely closed it again. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Elena stood, fury rising in her chest. "You can't just." "I can." His hand closed around her arm, not gently. "And I am. Walk or I carry you. Your choice." "You wouldn't dare. Test me." They stared at each other, and Elena saw that he meant it. Saw the cold rage in his eyes, the set of his jaw, and the way his whole body was vibrating with barely contained violence. She walked. He didn't release her arm as they moved through the crowd and didn't slow his pace even when she stumbled on the uneven floor. By the time they burst through the factory's back entrance into the cold night air, Elena was shaking with anger and something else she refused to name. "Let go of me." He spun her around, backing her against the brick wall, his body a cage around hers. "What were you thinking? Do you have any idea how dangerous that place is? There are men in there who would sell you to the highest bidder, who would. I know exactly what kind of place it is. That's why I went. To punish me. The world doesn't revolve around you, Silvio." "No." He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to a growl. "Then why did you leave your phone on your dresser? Why did you disable the tracker in your car? Why did you sneak out like a teenager breaking curfew?" "Because I'm not your prisoner. I'm not my mother's asset. I'm a grown woman who makes her own choices. Choices that could get you killed." "Then let them." The words tore out of her, raw and furious. "Let me make my own mistakes. Let me live my own life. I've spent 24 years being told what to do, who to be, and what to want. I'm done." Silvio's hands came up to frame her face, his grip firm, his eyes burning into hers. "I can't let anything happen to you." "Why?" "Because my mother told you to protect me." "No." The word was wrenched from somewhere deep. "Because if something happened to you, I wouldn't survive it. Because the thought of you hurt, of you gone, makes me want to tear this world apart with my bare hands. Because I have spent 50 years building a life out of control and discipline and duty. And you, Elena Moretti, have destroyed all of it in a matter of weeks." The confession hung between them, more devastating than any declaration. Elena's breath caught. "Silvio." "Don't." He released her, stepping back, running a hand through his hair. "Don't say anything. I shouldn't have. This was a mistake." "No." She grabbed his lapels, pulling him back. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to say something like that and then retreat behind your walls." "Elena." "I feel it too." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "This thing between us, I've felt it since the cemetery. Maybe before. Maybe I've always felt it, and I was just too young to understand. You're too young now. I'm 24 years old. I'm not a child. No. His voice was agonized. You're not. And that's the problem. He kissed her. It was nothing Aslina had imagined, and she had imagined it in the dark hours of the night, in the quiet moments between meetings. It wasn't gentle or tentative or careful. It was fire. His mouth claimed hers with decades of restraint finally unleashed, his hands fisting in her hair, his body pressing hers against the wall with a desperation that stole her breath. Elena kissed him back with equal fury and equal hunger, her fingers clawing at his shirt, pulling him closer, trying to climb inside him. When they finally broke apart, they were both gasping. "We can't," he said, but his hands were still in her hair. "We already have. This will destroy everything." "Then let it burn." His forehead dropped to hers, and for a long moment, they just breathed together in the cold night air. "I'm taking you home," he said finally. And then, he pulled back and his eyes were full of something Elena had never seen there before. Hope and terror and a tenderness that made her chest ache. "And then we figure out how to survive what we've started." They were 20 minutes from the estate when the first bullet shattered the rear window. Elena screamed. Silvio's hand slammed her head down, pushing her to the floor of the car as another shot cracked through the night. "Stay down." The car swerved violently as Silvio took the wheel from the driver. She hadn't even seen him move, and gunned the engine. Behind them, headlights blazed, a black SUV gaining ground. "Who is it?" "Calabrese." Silvio's voice was ice. "Your dance partner sent a message." More shots. The car fishtailed on the wet road, and Elena grabbed the seat to keep from being thrown. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. "Hold on." Silvio wrenched the wheel, and suddenly they were off the main road, tearing down a narrow lane between trees. Branches scraped the windows. The SUV's headlights disappeared momentarily, then reappeared, closer than before. "There's a safe house. 2 kilometers. If we can make it." A shot hit the tire. The car spun, slammed into something solid, and Elena's world went dark. When she came to, Silvio was pulling her from the wreckage. Her head was ringing, her vision blurred, but she was alive. She could feel his hands on her, urgent and desperate, checking for injuries. "Elena. Elena, look at me." She blinked. His face swam into focus. Blood on his temple, fear in his eyes. "I'm okay." Her voice sounded distant. "I think I'm okay. We have to move. Now." He half carried her through the trees, his arm around her waist, his gun in his free hand. Behind them, she heard shouts, engines, and the sounds of pursuit. But Silvio moved with terrifying certainty, navigating the darkness like he'd done it 1,000 times. The safe house was a converted hunting cabin, invisible until you were nearly on top of it. Silvio pushed her inside, locked the door, and moved immediately to a hidden panel in the wall. "Weapons," he said, pulling out a cache of firearms. "Medical supplies. Radio. We can hold here until morning. And then I kill everyone who tried to hurt you." The cold promise in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Elena felt something fierce bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or possession. Or something darker that she didn't have a name for. "You're bleeding." He touched his temple and grimaced. "It's nothing. Let me see." She pulled him to the small kitchen, pushed him into a chair, and found the medical kit. The cut was shallow but long, tracking from his hairline to his eyebrow. Elena cleaned it with hands that had finally stopped shaking, too focused on the task to think about what had almost happened. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "I took a first aid course in London. Seemed practical. You took it because you were thinking about coming back." She didn't answer. They both knew it was true. When the wound was cleaned and bandaged, Elena set down the supplies and looked at him. Really looked. Blood on his shirt. Exhaustion in his eyes. And beneath all of it, that constant, burning intensity that she had begun to crave like air. "You could have died," she said. "So could you. But you didn't hesitate. You didn't even think about it. I told you." He reached up and caught her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat steady and strong. "If something happened to you, I wouldn't survive it." The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, the nearness of death, the relief of survival, and the overwhelming need to feel alive. Elena leaned down and kissed him. This time it was different. Slower. Deeper. His hands came up to her waist, pulling her onto his lap, and she went willingly, straddling him, her fingers tangling in his hair. Elena. Her name was a prayer and a warning. "We shouldn't. I almost died tonight." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "We almost died. And all I could think the whole time was that I never got to touch you. Really touched you. That I would die without knowing what it felt like to be yours." His breath caught. "You don't know what you're asking." "Then show me." For a moment, he hesitated, the last remnant of duty fighting against everything else. Then something in him surrendered, and he was lifting her, carrying her to the small bedroom, and laying her down on the narrow bed with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. "If we do this," he said, his voice rough, "there's no going back. You understand that. You become mine. Not your mother's asset. Not the family's heir. Mine." "Good." She pulled him down to her. "I've been waiting my whole life to belong to someone who actually sees me." And in the dim light of the safe house, with danger still circling outside and blood still drying on his skin, Silvio Valenti finally stopped fighting. He was gentle when she needed gentle and fierce when she craved fierce. He mapped her body like he was memorizing it, whispered her name like a secret, and held her like she was something precious and powerful all at once. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare back. "My mother will destroy us," Elena murmured. "She can try. You've served her for 30 years. And I would betray her for you in a heartbeat." He tipped her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "I meant what I said, Elena. You're mine now. And I protect what's mine." Outside, dawn was beginning to break. The danger hadn't passed. If anything, it was only beginning. But for the first time since she'd stepped out of that car at her grandmother's funeral, Elena felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. The return to the estate was tense. Silvio's men had neutralized the immediate threat, but the message was clear. The Calabrese family considered Elena fair game. War was coming unless something changed. But Elena couldn't focus on the politics. Not when everything between her and Silvio had shifted so completely. They maintained their distance during the day, professional, appropriate, his hand never lingering too long on her arm, his eyes never betraying what lay beneath. But at night, when the house was dark and silent, he came to her room. Or she went to his. A week passed like this, stolen hours in the shadows, whispered words against her skin. Elena learned the map of his scars, the secrets he'd never told anyone, and the weight of 30 years of violence that he carried in his bones. She also learned that she was falling in love with him, and it terrified her. It was a Thursday when she finally voiced the fear that had been growing in her chest. They were in his quarters. The fire had burned down to embers, and her body was still warm from his touch. She lay with her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her, his breath slow and steady against her hair. "Silvio." What happens when my mother finds out?" She felt him tense almost imperceptibly. "She won't. She will. She finds out everything eventually." Elena turned in his arms to face him. And when she does, where will your loyalty lie? The question hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Silvio's face was unreadable in the firelight. I've served your mother for 3 decades, he said slowly. I've killed for her, lied for her, built her empire alongside her. I know. She trusts me more than anyone else in the world. I know that too. Elena's heart was pounding. That's what scares me. Silvio's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. What are you really asking me? I'm asking, her voice cracked. I'm asking if what's between us is real, or if I'm just a distraction, something to amuse you while you guard me. Elena. Because if it's not real, I need to know now. Tears she hadn't expected burned at the corners of her eyes. Before I fall any deeper. Before I give you the power to destroy me completely. Silvio was silent for a long moment, and Elena felt her heart slowly breaking. Then he kissed her, soft and deep and achingly tender. You're my mother's friend, Silvio. The words came out trembling. We shouldn't do this. He pulled back, gripping her chin, his eyes like cold flint that had finally, impossibly begun to thaw. Are you sure, Elena? His voice was low, a blade wrapped in velvet. Because I have 50 years of experience, and I can tell you exactly how this ends. Tell me. It ends with you. Everything ends with you. He drew a ragged breath. I spent my whole life believing that loyalty was the highest virtue, that service to the family was all that mattered. And then you walked back into my life, and I realized that I'd been dead for years, going through the motions, killing and lying and protecting, without ever feeling anything. His hand trembled against her face. You woke me up, Elena. You made me feel things I'd convinced myself I was incapable of. And now, his voice broke. Now I would burn the world for you. I would betray every oath I've ever sworn. I would put a bullet between Katerina's eyes myself if she tried to take you from me. The confession was raw, shocking, and irrevocable. Elena stared at him, seeing for the first time the full depth of what she'd unleashed, and what she'd been given. I love you, she whispered. That's a dangerous thing to say to a man like me. I know. She kissed him, soft and certain. I don't care. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. But they both knew the reprieve was temporary. The truth was coming, one way or another. And when it did, they would have to be ready. Caterina Moretti had not built an empire by being oblivious. She noticed the way Silvio's eyes tracked Elena across rooms. She noticed the subtle shift in his posture when her daughter entered a space. She noticed the way Elena smiled now. Not the brittle, defiant smile of a woman trapped, but something softer. Something secret. She noticed, and she began to plan. It was a Sunday evening when she summoned Silvio to her private study. The room was dim, lit only by the fire and a single lamp, and Caterina sat in her mother's old chair like a queen on a throne. Close the door. Silvio obeyed, his face betraying nothing. He had worn this mask for 30 years. He would not let it slip now. We have a problem, Caterina said. The Calabrese situation? No, a more personal one. She gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. He sat, every muscle tensed, every instinct screaming danger. I've been watching you, Caterina said. And my daughter. I've noticed certain changes. Elena has been cooperative. The adjustment has been smoother than expected. Has it? Caterina's smile didn't reach her eyes. Tell me, Silvio, in all the years you've served me, have I ever failed to see what was right in front of my face? The trap was closing. Silvio could feel it. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Katerina leaned forward. I'm stating a fact. You are in love with my daughter. The words landed like bullets. Silvio's face didn't change, but something in his chest cracked open. Katerina. Don't. Her voice was ice. Don't insult me by denying it. I've known you for 30 years. I can read every flicker of expression, every shift in your voice. You've been in love with her since the moment she stepped out of that car at my mother's funeral. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. She rose, pacing before the fire. Have you touched her? Silence. Damning, devastating silence. Katerina stopped. When she turned, her face was a mask of cold fury. I gave you everything. Power. Wealth. My trust, which I do not give lightly. And this is how you repay me. By seducing my daughter behind my back. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? She stalked toward him. Tell me, Silvio. Tell me how the man I trusted with my family's safety fell into bed with the daughter he was supposed to protect. I fell in love with her. The words were quiet, irrevocable. I tried to stop it. I tried to maintain distance. But Elena is my property. Katerina's voice cracked like a whip. She is an asset of this family, meant to secure alliances and continue the bloodline. She is not meant for a man like you. A man like me. A killer. A servant. A man who will be dead and forgotten while my family continues for generations. Her lip curled. You were supposed to guard her, Silvio. Not claim her. Silvio rose, and for the first time in 30 years, he looked at Katerina not as his mistress but as his enemy. Elena is not your property. She's not an asset or a pawn. She's a woman with her own mind, her own desires, and her own right to choose. She chose wrong. She chose me. And I will not give her up. Not for you. Not for the family. Not for anything. The silence between them was absolute. Katerina's face had gone pale, her eyes glittering with something that might have been grief beneath the rage. Then you leave me no choice. Her voice was quiet now, deadly. You have until sunrise to leave this estate. If you are still here when the sun rises, I will have you killed. And if Elena tries to leave with you, she met his eyes. I will have her killed too. Silvio stared at the woman he had served for 3 decades, the woman he had killed for, the woman who had once been as close to him as a sister. You would murder your own daughter? I would do what is necessary to protect this family. Katerina's voice didn't waver. I always have. That's what you taught me. She walked to the door and opened it. Sunrise. Silvio. Make your choice. Elena was in her room when Silvio came to her. One look at his face, and she knew something was terribly wrong. She knows. Yes. He closed the door behind him. We have until sunrise to leave. Leave. And go where? Anywhere. I have resources, safe houses, and contacts outside the family's reach. He took her hands. But we have to go now. If we're still here when the sun rises, she'll kill us both. Elena's mind raced. Running. Hiding. Looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives while her mother hunted them down. No. Silvio blinked. What? I said no. Elena pulled her hands free. I'm done running, Silvio. I've spent my whole life running. From this house, from my mother, from what I am. I'm not going to spend the rest of it running from her, too. Then what do you suggest? Fight her. With what army? With the one you've been building for 30 years. The words hung in the air between them. Silvio stared at her. Elena. You told me once that half the men in this organization are loyal to you personally, not to my mother. You said it as a warning, proof that power in this world is never stable. Elena stepped closer. What if we made it our advantage? You're talking about a coup. I'm talking about survival. Her eyes met his, fierce and certain. My mother will never stop. Even if we run, she'll find us eventually. The only way to truly be safe is to take her power away. You would do that. Turn against your own mother. She threatened to kill me, Silvio. She threatened to kill you. Elena's voice hardened. She stopped being my mother the moment she chose the family over her daughter. Now she's just an obstacle. Silvio was silent for a long moment, calculating, strategizing, doing what he had always done, but now for a different purpose. It would have to be tonight, he said finally, before she has time to move against us. Then we move now. There will be violence. Blood. I know. Elena touched his face, her eyes soft despite her words. I'm not afraid. Not with you beside me. He kissed her, quick and hard, and then he was in motion, pulling out his phone, making calls in rapid Italian. The next 3 hours were a blur. Silvio's loyalists gathered at strategic points throughout the estate. Weapons were distributed. Plans were made. Elena watched it all unfold with a strange sense of calm, knowing that when the sun rose, she would either be free or dead. They found Katerina in the main hall, surrounded by her own guards, already aware that something was wrong. I should have known. Katerina's voice was cool, but Elena saw the fear beneath it. I underestimated you, Silvio. I won't make that mistake again. You won't have the chance. Silvio stepped forward, his gun raised. It's over, Katerina. Your men have either surrendered or fled. The organization answers to me now. And to me. Elena stepped up beside him. The Moretti name isn't yours to command any more, Mother. Katerina's eyes flickered between them, her most trusted soldier, her only daughter, and something like grief crossed her face before the mask slammed back into place. If you do this, you'll never be free of it. The violence, the blood, the constant threat of betrayal. She looked at Elena. Is that really what you want? To become me? No. Elena's voice was steady. I want to become something better. Something this family has never been. And what is that? Free. Elena stepped closer to her mother. I'm going to tear down everything rotten in this empire and build something new. Something that doesn't require selling daughters or murdering sons. Something that might actually survive the next generation. Katerina laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You think it's that simple? You think you can just change what we are? I think I have to try. Elena met her mother's eyes. You can be part of it, Mother. Step down. Retire. Let me try to fix what's broken. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered in Katerina's eyes. Then it was gone. I'd rather die. She moved. Fast, faster than Elena expected. Pulling a gun from somewhere in her dress, swinging it toward Silvio. The shot echoed through the hall. But it wasn't Silvio who fell. Katerina crumpled, the gun clattering from her fingers. One of Silvio's men stepped forward, lowering his weapon, his face grim. Elena stared at her mother's body, waiting for grief, for guilt, for something. Instead, she felt only relief. It's done, Silvio said quietly. Yes. Elena reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. It's done. And now we begin. They stepped over the body together, walking out into the dawn. Behind them, the old order crumbled. Ahead of them, something new waited to be born, a kingdom built not on blood and fear, but on the impossible foundation of a love that should never have existed. A mafia princess and her mother's most trusted killer. A union that would remake an empire. A new reign, written in blood and silk. The end. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.